A long time ago, during 6th century BC, that doesn't stand for before coronavirus, the Israelites experienced the Babylonian exile or Babylonian captivity. Babylon had conquered Judah and destroyed the temple. The majority of those who had survived the attacks on Judah were then moved 700 miles to a new land and a new way of life. Now, as a people, this was probably not the worst thing that the Israelites experienced, but I think anything with exile in the title is best to be avoided. While they were in Babylonian exile, they were not enslaved. They were permitted to establish yeshivas or schools. They were allowed to retain their religion, and extra biblical evidence indicates they were given rations of grain and oil. Some of these circumstances don't sound that dissimilar to our current situation, where certain products are rationed at the stores, we're setting up and creating new learning environments, and our movements are being restricted. As they were forced to adapt to life in this new land, they longed for their old life. Old Testament professor Donald Gowan writes of the psychological trauma that those in exile endured, saying they must have been isolated individuals and frantic with anxiety. We hear their emotions and their longing for their homeland in Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. We also wept when we remembered Zion. We are adapting. We are grieving. There have no doubt been things that have caused us to weep. As coronavirus continues, we have begun to assimilate to a new way of life. The culture of Zoom happy hours and meetings, of online mass and social distancing. Like the Israelites, these things don't come naturally to us and they don't feel good when we do them, but we are adapting. And with these adaptations, we experience a loss. Our Zion, so to speak. Amidst our exile from our normal life, we have to acknowledge the things that we have lost and the grief that we are experiencing. The comfort of seeing our family and friends in person, of nights out, of visiting the lakefront on a sunny spring day. We miss these things. They're not extreme or severe events, but they are nonetheless losses. This past week, as it was announced that students in Illinois would not return to school to finish the academic year, I heard parents grieve on behalf of their children, reminiscing about their own prom or graduation, wanting these special experiences for their daughters and sons, or being sad that they wouldn't be able to play sports or participate in the school play. I imagine the Israelites in Babylon wanted things for their children too, and while they didn't have to battle screen time, they did their best to create a family structure of comfort and normalcy. In fact, one of the outcomes of the Babylonian exile was that the smaller family group became the emphasis rather than the emphasis on the tribes that had been the case prior to the exile. Amidst the Israelites' loss of land, temple, and their standard way of life, they did maintain their religious identity. Adapting and grieving didn't mean giving up their faith. And while we feel the loss of our Zion, hopefully we feel the strength and the support of God with us during this time. Sometimes changing how we do things can feel like a loss, and maybe we can be inspired by the steadfast faith of those in exile. It was hard. They wept. They longed for their old way of life and the comfort of the temple. But even in a foreign land, they kept their faith in Yahweh. In our COVID captivity, perhaps we can recapture and affirm our identity as children of God, no matter how far removed or how isolated we may feel. That has not and cannot be stripped from us. Eventually, the Persians conquered the Babylonians, and the Israelites were allowed to return home. Like we imagine what will happen once we are no longer required to shelter in place and businesses reopen, they likely looked forward to the day of their freedom, imagining what they would do and how they would live their lives. But the experience of exile had changed them. So some did return to their homeland, some remained where they were, and others settled in a variety of geographical locations leading to the Jewish diaspora. When we emerge from our shelter-in-place orders, we will likely be changed and come out at a different place than when we entered. Some of us will stay where we are, some will not go back to where we came from, and others will likely embark into new territory, though all of us hopefully recognizing the presence of God with us, no matter where this journey takes us. Some questions for reflection. Have you stayed connected to your faith and God during this time? And how so? What things have you had to grieve or let go of? And what have you done well at adapting to? Stay safe and be well.